Good afternoon, everyone. This is James Powell. I am the Director of Practice Development with ZEO ScientifiX. Welcome to today's webinar. At the end of this webinar, I'll make sure you have my email address. You'll have my cell phone number. You can always text. You can call. I welcome a one-on-one call. We're going to talk about the next frontier in regenerative medicine today. ZEO ScientifiX is a publicly traded biotech company committed to the research, development, and manufacturing of new biologic solutions. We're the nation's leading therapeutics research company pioneering innovative technologies in regenerative medicine. Our state-of-the-art research and manufacturing facility is in southern Florida at the Nova University. It's an FDA-registered, compliant laboratory. We have robust quality management systems, specialized equipment for larger scale biologic production, extracellular vesicle product testing, in-house microbiology and sterility testing, and access to the university's imaging, animal research, and genomic core facilities. To date, we've had 6 INDs approved with 4 phase 1 clinical trials completed. In the following categories, we've had these done: knee osteoarthritis, long hauler COVID, both moderate to severe and mild to moderate respiratory distress related to COVID complications, COPD with the Mayo Clinic, and mild TBI. We have 1 phase 2 approved, and we just started the one on the traumatic brain injury. There's certainly been a lot of clinical studies in recent years on these EVs, these exosomes. I know if you go on PubMed, where publications are there, research, and type in exosomes, there's literally in the tens of thousands. And again, I just mentioned some of the ones that we have done, these IND studies. I won't read through every single one I have up here, but you can always pause it and read through the abstracts there. This summarizes some of the ones we did related to complications of COVID, helping the immune response, lowering inflammation, certainly with cardiopulmonary complications of anything to do with COVID or any other respiratory problem, COPD, things like that, is shown already to be safe, and the results were quite impressive. I understand some of our other competitors in our industry also did 3 or 4 years ago some COVID-related INDs themselves. Very similar results, quite impressive, quite dramatic. And again, outlining some of the long hauler COVID studies that we did. You can see the results here again. If you want to read through every one of those, either you can pause this and read through that, or I have all of these in a brochure I can email out that details all of these studies. You can always look at that as well. Again, going through these various studies, you can see the conclusions toward the bottom of the paragraph there. Quite impressive. But again, I can always email you these studies. Another one to look at, you can read the full abstract, just pause it and read through it if you'd like. One more study, again. This was with bronchopulmonary dysplasia. You're going to find anything to do with inflammation, which is almost any disease process. We'll talk about this in a minute. The mechanism of action, you can see how this type of therapy has been shown in study after study after study to have a major impact on lowering inflammation, helping cell regeneration. So in other words, taking damaged cells, inflamed cells, and start the process of better blood flow, angiogenesis, lowering inflammation. And another aspect of the COVID study. Now we'll go into the science here in just a minute. This is a quick list of some of the products If you look at 5 of the 6 there, starting from left to right on the screen, these are differences in concentration of exosomes, but these are basically on those studies I looked at, we're looking at about 200 billion exosomes per ml in those clinical studies. But we do make different concentrations. We make them 100 billion to 50 billion, 400 billion, even up to 500 billion exosomes per ml. So various concentrations. These are marketed for topical use only, of course, or if you have an approved IND study, so approved IND studies, or we are able to market these for topical use only. The exception for the topical part is the one on the far right. This is PPX. I will be talking about that in detail here in just a few minutes. So why are we talking about the regenerative market? First of all, even in the last couple of years, it was already estimated to be about a $24 billion industry. And in the next 8 to 10 years, you're talking about probably a 6x increase. It's estimated at that point by 2032 to be about a $180 billion industry. Much of this industry, as you probably know, is cash only. I'm sure some of you or many of you listening to this call today already do some type of cash services, different types of cash procedures. It may be PRP or something else. And the therapeutic segment versus diagnostic segment holds the largest share of this regenerative market. This is something we're talking about today that really fits the bill for this. We have an aging population coupled with increasing rate of age-related disorders. When you look at all the problems people have, the health issues, anywhere from arthritis issues to irritable bowel to things that affect their sexual quality, their aesthetics, facial aesthetics, hair regrowth, all these types of things. Look at all the people getting knee replacements, hip replacements. All of these things, what they have in common is usually at the core of these issues, there's always inflammation there. We can even measure them in biomarkers in your lab work, and we'll talk about how this can have a dramatic effect on those types of things. When you look at the next generation of healing, look at some of the things that we're already doing and in the process of starting in recent years. We have much better imaging now than we did 20 years ago. We're now looking at epigenetics, your genome sequencing. We have some advanced blood diagnostics we have now that we didn't have several years ago. We're looking at gut health. We're looking at various metabolic scans. We now have the ability with some of these scans at looking at the heart and things. We can use AI to get a much better look at what type of plaque, whether you have the dangerous type of plaque. There's much better early cancer detection. So much better technology now than we've had in years past. So let's talk about the topic today, extracellular vesicles, EVs. You might know them as exosomes or EVs. These EVs are a category of cell-derived membranous structures. They're released by nearly all cell types. They're present in all body fluids. Years ago, we thought these EVs, these exosomes, were more of kind of like the garbage disposal for cells. We didn't fully understand up until more than a decade ago the function and capabilities of these EVs. We now know it's much more important. They are the mediators of cell-to-cell communication, and they can have a dramatic impact in what the studies show in lowering inflammation and helping cells grow, helping cells regenerate, reprogram. So basically taking damaged cells and making cells much more efficient. Now, when we look at exosomes under the microscope, they're pretty tiny. Remember, exosomes are not the cell itself. They're a portion of a cell, so they're acellular. basically looking between about 40 and 160 nanometers in diameter. Now, to give you an idea, put that in context, that is about 1/1000th the width of one strand of human hair. So very tiny, but they carry very important cargo. Some of the things they carry, they're in a typical exosome, there's over 300 bioactive contents in a single exosome: RNA, lipids, enzymes, proteins, these various growth factors, and probably the most important thing they carry is microRNA. We've actually been able to identify specific microRNA that lowers inflammation, specifically looking at RNA or microRNA 26A, 26B, 27. Those specific ones have the biggest impact on lowering inflammation. They can help convert the M1 macrophages to M2. M1 are the pro-inflammatory, M2 or the ones who are able to decrease inflammation. So these exosomes or EVs are very important in these two aspects of treating various things. Again, we've talked about it before, whether it's hair regrowth, whether it's for sexual functioning, P shots, O shots, aesthetics, maybe used topically for use with microneedling, of course, used in our IND studies that we've had approved for the things I talked about earlier, from knee osteoarthritis to COVID, respiratory issues. These are very important. And again, you can look, there's literally in the thousands of studies that show the safety and efficacy of these EVs. Now, besides looking at the size I mentioned earlier, what we do also, we can identify under microscopes the actual surface markers to identify exosomes. Now, this is very important. You can determine granulation and sizes of particles under flow cytometry. Now, it is my understanding that even some of our competitors in this industry look at the sizes and make an assumption that they must be mostly or all exosomes, but just looking at the size doesn't tell the real picture unless you identify these specific markers: CD9, CD63, CD81. These can specifically validate how many exosomes are in the products. This is how we know there's a product with 250 or 400 billion in an ml or 500 billion, is we're able to validate through looking at these specific surface markers. It's not good enough just to look at size ranges, because everything in that size range is not necessarily an exosome, but we also look at something called fluorescent nanoparticle tracking analysis and imaging with the use of fluorescence, and we can identify these specific markers. This is how we can determine, we've looked at all of this in our studies, we can determine and be able to see the microRNA I talked about, 26A and B, 27, the various growth factors in the exosomes can all be verified. Now, I know I'm being a little repetitive, but this is so important, and the value of these EVs is lowering inflammation and inducing cellular repair, cellular regeneration, cellular reprogramming. Now, besides improvement in symptoms, we can specifically look, we've looked in many studies, we've looked at various inflammatory biomarkers. Everyone probably knows what TNF alpha is, interleukin 6, interleukin 1 beta. You can look at the ones listed there. You can even look at HSCRP, homocysteine. So there's various inflammatory markers that can be checked for in a person's lab work. And we can test these markers prior to treatment with EVs and post-treatment and see a major difference in reducing inflammatory markers. In fact, one of the studies we have, again, I'll be happy to send you some of these, it shows a direct comparison of the product in the IND study, even a heads-up comparison, that versus PRP. And we can show tangible differences, statistically relevant differences in lowering inflammation using these EVs, just using something that many of you use, like PRP. Now, what implications does it have and can it have in the future? Well, almost anything. CNS disease, inflammatory bowel, different types of skin issues, autoimmune, which is so prevalent, cardiomyopathy, various lung problems, liver, kidneys, virtually any organ system which is experiencing some manifestation of inflammation. We even have some studies looking at a direct comparison of stem cell treatment versus EVs, and you'd be amazed at some of the differences we found, because even with stem cells, some of you are familiar with stem cell, even though it's not FDA approved, but we've seen patients go out of the country for stem cell treatment for various things. It can be very costly. They have to travel somewhere outside the United States. And if you think about it, what we now know is the real brain of stem cell is the exosome. These EVs, that's 80% of the benefits of stem cell treatment is simply in these EVs. So it can target these cells and have benefits with the immune response, wound healing, metabolic regulation, all of these things that even some people have gone out of the country for stem cell treatment. I know I've said this a couple of times already. You can kind of look through this, but really, if you think about almost any disease process, regardless of the pathology, the etiology, there's always two common denominators to virtually anything. Inflammation is some kind of a degradation in the cell to get ideal oxygenation. Think about that. Lack of proper oxygen, inflammation is two of the root causes for almost any disease. No. Now, we know there are certain things we can do in our lifestyle to help our cause in those two areas. Certainly, we can eat low inflammatory, low glycemic diets. We can do proper exercise. We can be on proper supplements. We can test for supplement deficiencies. So there's some things we can do. But basically, what these EVs can do is it's just able to help our body do what it was supposed to do anyway. Again, we can always help our cause with our lifestyle, but almost with anything, we've even seen in studies, and even anecdotally, patients being treated for maybe osteoarthritis, but maybe they have a decrease in Parkinson's symptoms. We know that Parkinson's, neurocognitive diseases, various ones, they're always tied somewhat to inflammation, besides whatever cause they had. So whether it's brain, whether it's lungs, liver, skin, eyes, heart, kidney, intestines, bone, etc., including cartilage issues, degradation of cartilage, osteoarthritis, meniscus issues, etc., injuries, shoulder, knee, hip, etc. This is really the future of medicine. Again, this is another slide, but pretty much goes by what I've been talking about the last few minutes. Now, not all EVs are alike. EVs are in a category. An exosome is a particular kind of an EV, but remember I said there's over 300 various growth factors in a typical exosome. What I said earlier, I'll reiterate now. We have been able to measure these with the use of fluorescent technology, the specific surface markers, to be able to identify the type of EVs, including the exosomes and the number of exosomes in a product. As far as commonly used delivery methods, the products I showed you earlier, other than IND, if you get an approved IND or approved for topical use, and they can be used in facial aesthetics, they can be used for hair regeneration. In our IND studies, including the one we just started with TBI, we're looking at nebulized treatment. In our IND studies, we used intra-articular, we used IV push. Amazing outcomes from all of these various delivery methods. Again, more research. Now, these are a few studies outside of ZEO ScientifiX. I've actually taken the liberty of accumulating various studies by category, whether it's for orthopedic applications, whether it's for aesthetics, whether it's for skin, whether it's for sexual wellness, etc. If you want me to send those to you, I'll save you some time by looking on PubMed and going through the thousands of studies. One thing I will say, and I just chose a bunch of random studies in these subcategories, but they're very consistent, and I think the results have been pretty overwhelming. Some of the studies that I can send to you, even I wanted to do this intentionally. I wanted them to compare PRP versus these EVs in a direct comparison. I think they're extremely consistent, overwhelming. In fact, I welcome you to show me one study showing PRP versus the use of these EVs where PRP was shown to have better results. I haven't found one, not a single one in thousands of studies. So I think they're very, very consistent. Now, I won't read through each one of these other than me emailing those to you. You can certainly pause the presentation, take a moment and read through some of these. But again, this one shows the promotion of angiogenesis and tissue regeneration. This particular one was done showing the potential benefits, and a lot more studies will be done on cardiovascular disease and cardiopulmonary, lung disease, heart disease. Again, you can pause this and read through all the details if you want to. This is directed more toward lung disease. Again, I know that coincides with some of the IND studies that we've done with COVID and COPD. This particular one outlines osteoarthritis and cartilage. Quite impressive. If you go through and read through these, again, I have just in the orthopedic application studies I've accumulated, I think the Word document is like 35 pages. I have dozens of studies on that. Very consistent, very impressive. As far as we do have a lot of clients that like to use EVs for medical aesthetics and dermatology. They can be applied to the skin locally. It's a very common practice to use with microneedling. You can look at a lot of studies with this, even before and after pictures. They are quite impressive. I currently use just a topical product with ZEO that has exosomes in it. I've already seen a difference myself, even without microneedling done. Again, remember I talked about the microRNA. It can help mediate wound repair, hyperpigmentation. It can help with collagen production, elastin, things like that, which is no wonder why it's popular topically for medical aesthetics. Now, let's talk about, we're going to kind of shift gears here. I want to talk about a real game changer in the biologic industry. ZEO ScientifiX has created an autologous exosome product called PPX. It's the first of its kind. Concentrated exosomes is really like next generation PRP. The reason we say that is because it's taken from the patient's blood. Instead of the topical applications I talked about earlier, which are amniotic fluid sourced, this, similar to PRP, is from a patient blood draw. The patient is basically getting the exosomes from their own blood draw. Again, that would be something very similar to PRP, except if you research, you can even Google it. If you look up PRP, because the real value, most of the value, clinical value of PRP is in the exosomes, the growth factors in the exosomes. Once again, you might get 1 billion exosomes in a typical PRP sample. Now, it sounds like a lot, but compare that to 400 billion per ml. And in our PPX, from that patient's blood draw, it yields 2 1 ml vials. You can use it one treatment, both mLs. You can use the 1 ml and maybe whatever you want to do. The other IV, the other ml maybe 90 days later, you have some flexibility, and we can give you guidance from our practitioners that use this now on what's been done, some of their case studies. So much more concentrated, significantly more concentrated than a typical PRP. Now, the difference is you're not able to spin this in your office. This is a patent pending process. So we send a kit out. It's actually quite simple. It just takes a few minutes. We send the full kit out, everything to draw the blood, and the chain of custody and the paperwork and all that. It's very simple to do. And you draw the blood, you send it back into FedEx, and in about a week to 10 days, we send back to you the 2 1 ml vials. Again, much more concentrated, 400 billion exosomes per ml. Again, in a PRP sample, you might have 1 billion. This has been a real game changer. And because it's like PRP, like next generation PRP, it meets the same criteria as PRP, meaning you don't have to have FDA pre-market approval. So that can be used other ways besides topical. IV, nebulized, intra-articular, etc. So that's a big difference. Now, by the way, I do want to mention, I've talked a little bit about the science, how the growth factors, the microRNA, the converting the M1 macrophages to M2, kind of the science behind why this has been so powerful in thousands of clinical studies now you can look up. But I do want to talk about our monthly forum. ZEO ScientifiX offers a monthly forum, maybe monthly or bi-monthly. We'll announce the dates ahead of time. In fact, as of this recording, we're down to one forum left for this year, November 8th. We'll be announcing the 2025 dates, but this has been incredibly valuable. It's about a half-a-day event. It's on site in our ZEO lab in Fort Lauderdale. You can collaborate with other experts. You can get a full education. This includes presentations by our chief medical officer. This includes presentations by, there's always a featured physician who's used our product. There is a lab tour. There's an education and lecture by the PhD who's over the lab. I gave you an overview of the science. He really goes into a lot more detail, and you can also ask questions. Always, there are clinicians who've already been using ZEO ScientifiX products. You can ask them questions. They'll discuss how they've used it, etc. This is just a great way to learn all the details you need to know and really collaborate with some of your peers. So we really welcome any of you to book one of these forums and come to it. It goes until about 2:00 p.m. There's lunch served, etc. There's networking, all of that. I can send you some details on it. Again, I've talked a little bit about the PPX product. It is, some of this is repetitive, I know, but it is a real next generation PRP. It's full of these microRNA, other bioactive agents to lower inflammation and help with tissue repair. The studies, when we've looked at comparing this to PRP, it does show more of the microRNA, as I talked about. There's been, in direct comparison, it certainly showed a statistical difference in lowering inflammatory markers that we can measure. Remember, unlike PRP, it is acellular, which means if you know about PRP, one of the disadvantages of it is probably why some of the studies still, after 70 years of using PRP, still has some mixed results, is you don't know what you're putting back in the patient. Once you spin it and put it back in the patient, you really have no way to test it. We test this PPX. It is tested for microbial contamination. It's tested for any kind of antigens. And it's free of all of that. So everything's been validated and tested. You get a certificate of authenticity in testing. So it just has significant advantages over using the typical PRP. If you would like more details on that, again, you're about to have my phone number, email, etc. I do want to mention that when you're a client of ZEO ScientifiX, it's really what we call a turnkey model. We offer various types of training for physicians, clinicians, and staff. We have marketing tools. Everything's already been approved by FDA. Attorneys that we have is compliant to market the right way, the compliant way, every I's dotted, every T's crossed. We have what we call a toolbox library. You can certainly use our materials. You don't have to, but it has anything from patient consent forms. It has procedure instructions, what they should be aware of pre and post treatment. We offer ongoing sales support because you do have to, any kind of a cash service, there's some selling that has to be done. We offer all of that and ongoing training support and the ability to collaborate with experts on not only these forums, but also webinars that we do that you can plug into, hear case studies, and ask questions of experts and some of your peers. So we do offer, again, a turnkey model. Now, this next slide here, we're about done. You can pause this, and I invite you to go through each one of the 6 details here. Is basics of the regulatory considerations for this. I think everybody knows you have to be careful in how you market this, what you say, what you cannot say. Certainly we cannot make claims. I won't read through all 6, but I invite you to pause right now and read through the 6, but we will give you guidance on all of this, even kind of the do's and don'ts of how to market this so you stay compliant. But again, pause this and take a moment to read through the regulatory considerations. And I do welcome a phone call, a text. Let me know who you are. You watch the presentation, you have questions, you'd like to set up a one-on-one call. I would love to take a few minutes and get an idea of your current practice, what you do now, what your goals are, what you might be looking to expand upon. We offer different products, as I said, for topical and the PPX. I can give you the right guidance of what might be most appropriate for you, what options would be best for you. Here's my email as well. So thanks again for plugging into this call today, this webinar. And please write down my contact information, and I welcome a call. Thank you so much.